Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will always have a live chat on the first Friday of the month at 8 p.m. So please subscribe, click on the bell, and let's get 1,000 subscribers very soon. Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Zapadoslavia existed. What do I mean by Zapadoslavia? You might be familiar with the term of Yugoslavia, the union of southern Slavs. Zapadoslavia would be the union of Western Slavs. The Western Slavs are the Poles, the Czechs and the Slovaks. You can also count of course the Serbs and to a lesser degree the Kashubians and even the Silesian people, as well as some people who consider themselves not to be Czechs but Moravian. Zapadoslavia, or the idea of an union of the Western Slavs, may sound ridiculous at first, especially for Czechs and Slovaks, who would be afraid to be dominated by a strong Poland. But there were people on both sides, the Polish and the Czechoslovak side, who supported this idea, an idea of a Polish-Czechoslovak union. Masaryk already had an idea in 1917, and Pilsudski, who was the most influential Polish politician at the time, he wanted to create the Medzymorze, a federation of Eastern European states to counterbalance Russia and Germany. But as we know, everything came different. In 1918, and during the same time where the Poles were fighting the Red Army, the Czechoslovaks wanted to take all of Cieszyn and the Zaolzie region. It was much later on decided by the League of Nations that Cieszyn should be divided between the two countries, but Cieszyn and Zaolzie, they were not the only problem. But what if all of this came differently? What if Zapadoslavia existed? The first obvious thing that one would need to change is that the project that was launched by Masaryk in 1917 would be taken more seriously by the Czechs, the Slovaks and also the Poles. Both sides would discuss their points and would actually analyze the implication of such an union. Pilsudski would not mind to take a few compromises as long as there would actually be a union of some sort, while the Czechoslovak side would be happy if their peoples were respected by the Poles in such an union. There would be probably a bi-cameral system, somewhat similar to today's Germany system, where each part of the union would have some fixed number of representatives, no matter the size of it, and a parliament where the parties would see coalitions, as in Belgium for instance, where you will have not only a coalition between two parties but maybe even four parties, and two of them are from the Flemish part and two of them are from the Walloon part. Pilsudski could probably also agree that Cieszyn could be divided, or that the whole Zaolzie region could be declared as special administrative zone, which would mean that there is no border war. The Poles, they could then focus on the war against the Red Army, and the Czechoslovaks would probably help them as well. Seeing how there would be such a union of Western Slavs, some Ukrainian politicians could also try to distance themselves much earlier from Russia and redefine themselves as Western Slavs. With less pressure in other parts within Poland, Poland could manage to take even more lands of the Soviets, and something similar to Medzymorze would come to existence, but the name of it would be Zapadoslavia. First of all, it is because the name Yugoslavia would already exist and Zapadoslavia would come really close to it. Second of all, because the majority of the population would be of Western Slavic origin, Yes, although Ukrainians are not really part of the Western Slavs, but they're elite, they would just conveniently redefine themselves as Western Slav. And a third implication would be that after all of this, Krakow would become the capital, as it would be close from Czechnia, Slovakia and also Ukraine, and also for historical reasons, while Prague, Warsaw and Bratislava become some sort of national capitals. Krakow will have their own special status, and Zapadoslavia could look somewhat like this. Zapadoslavia would give some autonomy to Kashubia, Silesia, Moravia and the Ukrainians, while the Lithuanians might also get some type of autonomy or maybe not at all, and the Belarusians, they would probably become Polonized. The Belarusians never really had a strong identity, and even nowadays most of them prefer to speak Russian rather than Belarusian, so if Poland was more dominant and would probably have a longer influence in there, probably Polish would become more strong. The industry of this country would be huge, as well as the agricultural output, and Zapadoslavia would quickly rise to become a very important European economy, and if not maybe the most important in Eastern Europe. They would have many great universities with a high number of elite scientists, and they would all rise to become the country's elite. Moreover, due to the fact that Pilsudski would see his dream becoming true in some form, he would not retire in the early 20s, and Poland would not suffer any times of troubles in such an union. Politically, Masaryk and Pilsudski would dominate the political landscape for a long time, while the opposition will have a very hard time to somehow form actually an opposition. You will have various nationalists, you will have autonomists, you will have Czechoslovakists, you will have Polish nationalists, you will have Poles who want a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, you will have the Zapadoslavs, you will have socialists, communists, conservatives, liberals, and again all of them would be redefined whether they are Zapadoslavic communists or maybe just Czech communists, for instance. While in name Zapadoslavia would be a democracy, Pilsudski and Masaryk, they would somehow try to establish some type of harder control. It would not become a military dictatorship, but much later it would definitely become somewhat more authoritarian and get a similar evolution as Poland, for instance. Pilsudski and Masaryk, they would also agree to some demands of the nationalists and autonomists, so they could take off some main points of them, leaving the opposition even weaker, while fighting and suppressing the more radical nationalists and also communists. Their main enemy would be the Germans, however. The Germans in Czechnia, they were now a very small minority. They would not find anyone to collaborate with, and they would feel constantly threatened by the Zapadoslavists. And now that the Germans are even a tinier minority, they will have a very hard time to actually gain some influence. Hitler, who would still demand the Sudetenland, would obviously fail to get it from Zapadoslavia. And Zapadoslavia, they would actually be very much prepared for such a moment, because, let's face it, the whole purpose of this creation of Zapadoslavia was to protect the Poles, the Czechs, the Slovaks and everyone who defines as Western Slavs from the Germans and the Russians. That was what Pilsudski wanted. As Germany rose from the ashes and became a threat, most of the opposition actually became more quiet and would reluctantly work with the Zapadoslavist government. Because, let's face it, if the Germans would rise again, then the chances are very high that even Czech communists or Polish nationalists, they would rather collaborate with their government that they have in place than to collaborate with the devil. The defenses in the Sudetenland, they were very good. Poland, Czechnia, Slovakia, all of Zapadoslavia, they would have new tanks, good planes that were produced, and only if the Soviets would intervene and have a lot of luck, Zapadoslavia could fall. This alternate World War II starts in a similar fashion as in OTL, but with Zapadoslavia and no Sudetenland for Germany. Germany would lose many soldiers in the Sudetenland, while the Zapadoslavian tanks and air force as well as manpower would prove to be problematic for Germany. Zapadoslavia would, however, be overconfident and not really have any type of allies at first. After some weeks of fights, the Zapadoslavian government would try to get other countries on board. Lithuania would only agree to work with Zapadoslavia because Zapadoslavia actually would threaten it to do so. Romania would agree to an alliance, and the Allies would see this as an opportunity to strike and finish Germany once and for all. While they did this, Stalin, who got fake reports by the Germans, would intervene and invade Zapadoslavia from the east. Zapadoslavia had great defenses, and the Ukrainians would sponsor rebellions and dissidents within the Soviet side. The rivers and the forest would pose good defenses, and the Soviets could be stopped as well for some time. They would not have a lot of equipment, while Zapadoslavia would have a lot of equipment. They would have a lot of motivation. They would be much more united than the Soviets, but still have the Germans on the other side of their back. The Germans would push further west, and they would be able at some point to cut Czechnia from the rest of Zapadoslavia, which would leave Zapadoslavia very, very vulnerable. While Lithuania could invade East Prussia, and later on Romania would also join the party, but against the Soviets. Zapadoslavia would almost fall, but luckily for them, Finland would launch a surprise attack, and the Allies were starting to attack the Germans. Forces from the German Zapadoslavian front were taken. Czechnia would be reunited with the rest of Zapadoslavia, and they would now be able to move to the Eastern Front for a few kilometers. I think that around 1942 Germany is taken out, mostly by French and British forces, and Zapadoslavia could conclude a wide peace with the Soviets. Europe would look almost unchanged except for Germany. Germans would get expelled from Zapadoslavia, a population exchange could happen with the Soviets and the Zapadoslavian government, and Zapadoslavia annexes not only parts that Poland took in OTL, but they would also take the part where the Sorbs live. Because at the end, the Sorbs, they were also of Western Slav inheritance, or they had Western Slavic origins, and thus it is normal that Sorbs or the Sorbian region would be included as integral part of Zapadoslavia. Lithuania would get some parts of East Prussia. Japan still messes up, and the US becomes a great power in the Pacific, and the Soviets would reshift their focus in Asia, and a lot of communism would appear in Asia and later on in the former colonies. The Cold War would mostly be between the communists and the rest of the world, but the European powers would have a stronger independent agenda on their own, and until the fall of communism, this alliance between the Europeans and the US, it would finish, and depending on the situation in Zapadoslavia, we could see a very stable and strong Zapadoslavia that could even absorb the rest of Ukraine, Belarus, and truly become the greatest power of Europe, or it could fall down in a civil war similar as Yugoslavia, where you will have an independent Czechnia, Slovakia, Poland, Serbia, Western Ukraine, and probably also Kashubia and Silesia, even maybe have pockets of Moravian nationalists, and Poland itself would look very weird and very unstable, and this would just become a hell of a disaster. But I think that after such a very different Cold War, and also a time where there would not be a communist government within Zapadoslavia, chances are very high that it would stay and be able to survive for a long, long time. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.